All right, we're wrapping things up. I posted that the thing that I sent yesterday. I posted a copy of it on my pastoral too, and just kind of keep looking back at it. I might add some stuff. We'll look back at that page because I may add some things. Well, I'm sure that I will today and tomorrow. Nothing that'll be surprising. Just all right. Let me finish this up. All right, so we're talking about the death penalty on Tuesday, and as I said from the movie Kingpin, you know what the church says about the death penalty? No, what do they say? Oh, they're against it. They're against it. Imagine that. From a pro-life standpoint, they're against it. Now, and I'll read a bit of the catechism here in a minute, but you'll see that they believe, you have a right to defend yourself, in your home and your property and all there's all those things that are going on. But yeah, as far as recourse kind of by the state criminally, but the reason this is kind of an issue recently, at least since 2018, actually, since almost exactly 2 years ago, is because our Pope Francis, actually made a change to the catechism. So if I have an older copy of the catechism here. I'm not sure when it's published, but probably not long after it came out. It's actually too small for me to read. I need special glasses to read it. Here's the other one. This is also, doesn't look so old, but and the Pope, though, made, and I don't know how unprecedented this was. I don't really know because I've only known one catechism, and it's this one right here, as far as, as a compilation of church teaching. But the Pope made a change to the catechism. And it may seem minor, but just the idea that he did that is something. But the fact that, and so if you buy a new catechism, you'll find that there's a section that's been changed, and it's the section on the death penalty, which is apparently a topic that Francis is particularly interested in and against. By the way, we had a graduate of Cashel Hall who was governor for 8 years. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anyone? A Cashel grad who was governor in the 1990s. No? Frank Keating. Governor Keating went to school here. His daughter went to school here. I don't think any other Keatings went here. Well, his brother went here, but he was actually a pretty well-known writer. But anyway, Frank Keating went to school here back in the 60s, I think, and then became governor in the night. He was governor when the Murrah building was bombed in downtown Oklahoma City, the federal building, and he got a lot of national attention from that. He was a U.S. attorney. He was an FBI agent, and then governor of the state. I think he's toyed with the idea of running for president occasionally, but I don't know if he's going to do it or not, but we'll see. Anyway, but he was a Catholic, went to an observant Catholic, faithful Catholic in most all ways, except for it's hard to get elected governor of Oklahoma if you're against the death penalty, yeah? So politically, at least, he was pro-death penalty, and while he was governor, 8 years, a number of death penalty cases, were coming to the penalty phase, and the governor gets the last kind of say on these crimes. They're usually almost always murder, of course, and the governor can stay an execution or can vacate a sentence like that. The governor has the right. There's a better word for this, not amnesty, but the governor has a right to reduce a sentence. There's a better word for it though legally. Say again. Clemency, where it goes from death to life in prison or something. Okay, and there have been other Catholic governors around the country who have kind of bucked the system and have and said as these death penalty cases come along. But in other states, they don't come along as frequently as they do in Oklahoma, because we do as far as compared to other states, we do a good number of executions. And so the other states like Illinois and Wisconsin, and they've had governors there who are Catholic who have said, clemency and had it knocked down to life in prison or something like that. Whenever there's a death penalty case, though, if you can imagine being a Catholic governor of a state and you know you have this authority to give clemency to a person who's on death row, and you know, according to church teaching, that would be the right thing to do at that point. It may not be politically expedient, but okay, maybe not get reelected, but all right. And Pope John Paul II, and I don't know about Benedict or Francis, I would imagine that they followed this tradition that if a leader, like a governor in the United States, had a execution coming up in their state, through the Pope himself would write a letter, a separate, like a personal letter to that governor. Then it would be delivered like a diplomatic letter through the papal nuncio in Washington, D.C., be delivered to the governor himself. So every time that, let's say our former student here, Frank Keating, had a death penalty case coming up, and they were going to have to execute someone, he would get a letter from the Pope begging him to please stay the execution or to grant clemency and would appeal to him on theological and religious basis that way. That would be fairly persuasive, I would think. That you would have to give some weight to that kind of someone like that reaching out to you, especially if you're Catholic. I'm sure the Pope wrote letters to a lot of non-Catholic governors as well. Also, obviously, most governors probably, or just by statistically, are not Catholic. But anyway, that's what happened. Governor Keating, who I actually thought was a very good governor, though never took heed of any of these letters. I'm sure he read them, but the executions all went forward as normal. So, yeah. Okay. So the section in the Catechism, if you don't know this, the Catechism is divided into these sections, and this all kind of happens between section 2263 and 2267, and 2267 is the section that really deals directly with the death penalty. 2263 and 64 and 65 deal with personal, your legitimate defense of yourself, your family personally. And then 2266 deals with kind of the obligations of the state to maintain an orderly situation where hopefully you don't find yourself in a situation having to defend yourself in some kind of defensive way, or maybe even using lethal force. But 2267, though, deals with the death penalty. This is what the Catechism used to say. So here's the difference in the two things. This is it. This is under John Paul II when this Catechism came out right here. Assuming that the guilty party's identity and responsibility have been fully determined, the traditional teaching of the Church does not exclude recourse to the death penalty. If this is the only this is what I'm trying to get across on Tuesday. If it is the only possible way of effectively defending human lives against the unjust aggressor. That's why I use the example of maybe in a wartime situation, you're taking a prisoner, and that prisoner is just set on killing as many people as they can before you finally decide to kill them. That might, where you don't have the capability or the means to incarcerate this guy or keep him from doing what he's doing. Goes on, this is the old version. If, however, non-lethal means are sufficient to defend and protect people's safety from the aggressor, authority will limit itself to such means as these are more in keeping with the concrete traditions of common good and more in conformity to the dignity of the human person. And then the last paragraph of the old version says, today, in fact, as a consequence of the possibilities which the state has for effectively preventing crime, by rendering one who's committed an offense incapable of doing harm, meaning putting them in prison, without definitely taking away from him the possibility of redeeming himself. Yeah, we want to leave open the door of redemption for that person at some point. The cases in which the execution of the offender is an absolute necessity are very rare, if not practically non-existent. So Tuesday, I started by saying the door's just kind of left a little bit open there. today, in today's world, with all the possibilities we have to detain somebody and incarcerate them, the cases in which execution of the offenders is absolute necessity are rare, very rare, if not practically, is that a double negative? If not practically non-existent? I probably shouldn't criticize the grammar. I think. All right. Francis comes in and he rewrites this in part. And it was a bit controversial, not what he had to say, but the fact that he exercised this kind of unprecedented authority to do this. But here's what he says. Okay, recourse to the death penalty on the part of a legitimate authority following a trial, a fair trial, was long considered an appropriate response to the gravity of certain crimes and an acceptable, albeit extreme, means of safeguarding the common good. Today, however, there's an increasing awareness that the dignity of the person is not lost even after the commission of very serious crimes. In addition, a new understanding has emerged of the significance of penal sanctions imposed by the state. Lastly, more effective systems of detention have been developed, which ensure the due protection of citizens, but at the same time, do not definitively deprive the guilty of the possibility of redemption. Last paragraph. Consequently, the Church teaches in the light of the gospel that the death penalty is inadmissible because it is an attack on the inviolability and dignity of the person. And she works with determination, the Church, meaning she, the Church, works with determination for its abolition worldwide. So that's a much stronger statement against the death penalty, where the door is left open a little bit. In the original writing of it, Francis closes the door on that and says it's wrong. Yeah, okay. Again, I'm not sure what you do in the kind of situation that I gave you, like in a wartime thing, but I don't know. In war, it's probably seen a lot differently, but that I don't know as much about. Okay. All right. You might have seen on the study guide that I was going to talk, what I'm going to talk about here in the last couple of days. I want to talk just briefly, well, maybe just the rest of today, about, I don't know, I'm trying to pick some things that are, I mentioned cafeteria Catholicism, and I'm picking some things that are, because like I said, in Oklahoma, you know, you can find a lot of pro-life people, but when they say pro-life, they probably mean they're pro-birth, right? Like they mean people are pregnant, we want them to have babies, right? That's the teaching of the Church. Absolutely, there's no, you guys all know that. But that's what they're talking about. Babies, yeah, the unborn. Pro-life, actually, in the Church speaking, it's actually a much larger thing, a much larger thing, because life is a lot longer than just the time you were born. And John Paul says that life begins at conception, and there's a dignity to the human being from conception to natural death, not at conception and at natural death only, but even in between those two times. We have a pro-life stance during your life itself. That means a lot of things then. Anyway, that's so you would find a lot of Catholics in Oklahoma, like Governor Keating, who are probably anti-abortion, pro-life, but they're also pro-death penalty. So they find themselves kind of in lockstep with the teachings of the Church, except for on this issue of the death penalty, they find themselves out of step with the Church. So I don't know, I'm picking a couple things like that. The other thing we'll talk about here today is celibacy in the priesthood, right? We all know what that means. Celibacy in the priesthood. No sex, that's what it means if you didn't know, celibacy. And not being married, that's the other part. Along with only a few other churches, really, Christian churches, sets us apart from most other Christian denominations. And I think it's a more intriguing topic to non-Catholics maybe than to Catholics. But among Catholic priests, Roman Catholic priests, when I say Roman, I mean Roman Catholic, because there are other rites of the Church within the larger, dome of the Roman Catholic Church that do allow priests to be married. I think the Byzantine rite allows priests to be married, and there are other Eastern rites of the Church where there's a married priesthood. I think the Maronite rite is also, and we have a Maronite Catholic Church here in Tulsa, which are Catholics from Lebanon, or from that region. That's right. Their church is over on 71st and 169, kind of that academy is kind of stuck back over there. They're on the other side of 71st Street. And I believe, in fact, the priest I think who's there is actually married. And then some of the Orthodox churches then also have an unmarried priesthood or a celibate priesthood. But the Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church, that right underneath the Catholic Church, is a bit unique in the enforcement of this idea of this requirement, let's say, of celibacy for the priesthood. And there's, I keep hearing it's getting better, and it seems like we have, like, for instance, I'm talking about a number of vocations we have. When I say vocations, I mean the number of people who are young men who are showing interest in becoming a priest. There was a real crisis in the church, and I think we can still say there is a crisis of new vocations, of new priests coming in, and not just priests, but sisters and brothers and deacons, and there's a lack of all these things, and even there's some large churches in Tulsa that have only one pastor, and maybe they have a younger priest there too, but that younger priest won't be there for long because pretty soon he'll be running his own parish. Used to be a priest had to be a priest for maybe 8, 9, 10 years before they got their own parish, but now they're getting thrown into running a parish within a few years. That's just the way things are. And we have a lot of priests who are serving at they're serving at 2 parishes. There's been times when things really were bad in the 1990s. We had a few priests here at Cascia who were teaching full time, and they're Augustinian priests. And then on one night a week on Wednesday, they were basically serving as the pastor at a parish. The bishop had called, and of course there's this lack of priests, and they were reaching out to the Augustinians to fill some of these spaces. And they were usually smaller. We had a priest here who was serving not Pawhuska, but in Cleveland at a church in Cleveland, Oklahoma, and another maybe Drumright, I think. That's not all that far from there. And he was doing 2 parishes and working full time here and having to go 2 nights a week to parish council meetings or every other week. And I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He was just burning the candle at both ends, but that's what the need was, and people filled that as needed. Of course, the priests here have actually been pretty Cascia fill in. I've been in different parishes where one of our priests shows up because a priest is sick or a priest is on vacation, and they get asked then to fill in as a priest at a parish for that weekend, for that Sunday or Saturday or Sunday. But we've had this crisis of vocations. Last century it started in about the little past the midway point to the 20th century, and of course it's extended on into the 21st century. Although it seems to be getting better, but nothing like it was before, let's say, before the 1960s or so. And so there's been that lack of vocations has caused people to talk about, well, maybe we should allow priests to marry. And I guess that makes an assumption that the reason people aren't becoming priests is because they can't have a family. They can't have a wife and a family. I don't know that that's the case, but I think that's the assumption. It seems to be a logical assumption that if we let people marry, that because but it turns out, in fact, that a lot of churches are having trouble with vocations to their becoming pastors, and maybe it's a bigger problem than just than being able to marry or not. Although I will say that probably is a hurdle for a lot of people, though. There was, and he's not here anymore. I think he's retired, but there was a pastor at St. Bernard's. St. Bernard's out south. Anyone know St. Bernard's Church, 101st, between Riverside and not Peoria and Yale, somewhere out there. There was Father Eastman. He was a British guy. He was one of the pastors there, and he was married, but there was kind of a loophole that he got in on. if he was an Anglican priest in the Anglican Church in England, Church of England, and decided after he had served as a priest in the Anglican Church for a long time, he was married, that's allowed, of course, in the Anglican Church, that he wanted to convert to Catholicism, and he did it with the intent of converting and then becoming a Catholic priest. And there is a path there where if a person's married and they're a priest, I think it's in the Anglican, Lutheran, or Episcopalian, which Anglican and Episcopalian are related, but church, then it's possible for you then to come into the Catholic Church and keep your wife, right? You don't have to leave your wife behind. And so you can be married and be a Catholic priest. That was Father Eastman. So there's some kind of, I don't know, some people saw that as kind of the door's open a little bit. Maybe it's possible. I think it was more of a pastoral decision about pastors. And to, we don't want to keep people who are learned and who are already trained pastors out of the priesthood because they're married and coming from that route. So it was a pretty narrow opening there. Okay, well, again, celibacy throughout the larger Catholic Church is not absolute, I guess. There's this thing with Father Eastman, let's say, that kind of route. And like I said, there's several rites of the church, rites, R-I-T-E-S, where priests can be married. But the church sees priestly celibacy as a discipline of the priests, and it's something that, and it's not a law, it's not canon law, it's not a rule, but it's a discipline of the church, and that's an important, different word. And just for our purposes, a discipline means that it's something that can be changed. And it's something that can be changed fairly easily. I mean, there'd be probably quite a bit of discussion about it, and I'm sure there would be. And there'd probably be a lot of opposition to it as well, inside the church and inside the hierarchy of the church. But it's possible, though, that the Pope could make a change. It's important, that Pope Francis, let's say, could decide, and of course you have to do that with he'd want to do that, with the help of and the consent of his magisterium. But that kind of thing could be changed. In fact, and just to round off numbers hugely, for about the first 1,000 years of the existence of the church, priests were able to be married. So for about half the church's existence, that was a acceptable life. There were always married. There were always celibate priests. There were always orders within the church, not like the Augustinians went around then, but before the first 1,000 years, that required celibacy. That was part of their, one of their vows that they took within that order. But for the most part, within the church, it was at least allowed that priests could be married. And so it's something that's changed since then, and there's different reasons why that changed. A lot of political stuff was going on, and bishops were married, and bishops then lived like princes, really. See that poster there on the wall by the clock, next to John Paul to the left? It says Würzburg at the top. You see that? No? See it? The poster? Anyone, just nod your head. Let's see the picture of John Paul with the beret on. Then to the left. See it? Okay. That looks like where the Kaisers lived or something, right? No, that's where the bishop lived. That's the bishop's residence there. Not bad, right? Look at the inside. There's a nice staircase there. Yeah, it's impressive. They lived like princes. Yeah, especially in these larger, Würzburg's not that large, but it used to be an important city, a more important city. And that's people go there. There's other castles there. They don't want to visit there. They want to see the bishop's residence. That's pretty nice. Everyone, I think, goes there probably assumes it's, especially people from outside of Europe, they would assume, well, that's where the King of Bavaria lived or something, or the King of Prussia, the Kaiser, I don't know. But they lived all right. So there are a lot of political stuff going on, and so there was a need then for maybe even pragmatic need for there to be a celibate priesthood. But there's other reasons for the course, other reasons maybe that we'll talk about here. Let me see here. All right. Okay, I settled that already. All right. I mentioned the Eastern rites also. So let's see. Yeah. So celibacy is not something that's seen as essential or necessary to the priesthood, because we do have other priests and other rites of the church that are married, and the other way that Father Eastman did that. Again, it's a discipline. It's not it's a discipline. It's not a doctrine or a dogma of the church. Something that can't be changed. Something that can be changed. Yeah, I rounded the numbers off. I said around the year 1000, but it was actually, if you want to know, 1074 is when the change was made that priestly celibacy became mandatory then for all priests. So you have kind of a grandfather then area there where there were people who were already married, and of course they lived out their life married, and then you had all the new priests that came in had to take a vow of celibacy. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I said all this stuff already. I got ahead of myself here. Yes. Well, there's a lot of reliance here upon some things that the Apostle Paul says about the fact that he didn't have a wife, and his kind of calling then to the church. He gets called a bit later to be an apostle than the other apostles were called. And then we have also also, and this is part of this political issue that was going on back then in the before the year 1000, and then even after that time as well. You had some not so well priests, like I said, some of these bishops were, and archbishops and cardinals were living pretty well. But the thinking here was that you wouldn't have any divided loyalties. That your loyalty is to one thing, well, obviously to God, but as to the church, and to the people that you're in charge of, that you're the pastor of this flock, and that's your loyalty. Whereas if you were a married priest, or if you were, for that matter, a married Methodist pastor, you would have that loyalty to your faithful that go to your church, and to God and to the church in general. But then you have your family, then you have your kids and your wife, and of course that's probably going to come in front of your dedication to and probably should, right? I know this is something that because I have friends who are pastors in other churches, and I know this is something that comes up all the time. Especially in the people I know, it's the husband who's a pastor, and that there are times that a family is necessarily, and I say this politely, necessarily neglected in some situation, because there's a need for that pastor to be somewhere, to be with somebody. And so if you can imagine, let's say, you're a pastor at a church, it doesn't matter what kind of church, and your kid's getting ready to have his first time to be pitching in a baseball game, and he's been looking forward to it, and you're looking forward to it, and you're in the stands, and your kid goes out to the mound, and you get a text message saying, "Hey, Mrs. Smith is on her last moments. She really wants you to come to the hospital and be with her." What do you do? That's a tough thing. That's the kind of, when I say divided loyalty, I don't mean some kind of high level thing. I just mean it just puts a strain on the family. But this is something that, just in my own opinion, this is something that Protestants have worked out. I mean, these pastors have worked this out. They found a way to make it work. They found a way emotionally, to their family, to their faith. They found a way to, and I'm sure, although I'm sure it's a strain, and I'm sure that I'd say it's only because it's mostly men who are pastors, but I think it's probably something that the wives of pastors, before they get married to this person who is a pastor, becoming a pastor, they have to kind of know what they're getting into. It's got to be a rough. There's going to be some rough times like that, where you're going to feel like your husband's abandoning the family to go take care of church stuff, and I don't know. Somehow, and I don't know the ins and outs of it, but somehow pastors' wives and pastors' families have found a way, and the pastor himself have found ways to deal with this. So Okay, but it does seem, though, that it would take away this sense of divided loyalty. So you have our priests here at Kasha, and they have a certain mission and charism, and the priests here in the monastery, theirs is teaching. That's what they do, and administration of the school and teaching in addition to that. So that's what they do. They don't have other obligations. Now they may have extended family. They may have, of course, they have parents, so they have brothers and sisters and all that. But their commitment is first and foremost here to the church and to the school and to teaching. Okay, so I keep getting ahead of myself here. Again, theoretically, a pope could modify or even dissolve mandatory celibacy, but that seems unlikely would happen, quite that easily. But this is a discussion that comes up more often when there's seemingly a crisis in the vocations, but also it comes up more often, let's say, than the discussion about women becoming priests in the Catholic Church. That had some, I don't say some traction, but had a lot of people talking about it when there was this shortage back in the 90s, this crisis. That was kind of shut down pretty in a theological way. But the idea of a married priesthood, though, that's a door that hasn't been closed, and that's still open for discussion and debate if needed to. As I said, yes, there's been a decrease in the number of vocations in the Catholic Church. Also been a decrease in the number of vocations to the clergy in Protestant churches as well. And that's even where there are women who can become clergy in many churches, not all, but many. Also, some reasons maybe for this. Families, Catholic families even, are much smaller than they used to be. From the time of, let's say when I said before the 19th, or sometime before the mid-1960s, Catholic families had become smaller. It wasn't unusual to have a family of 5, 6, or 7 kids in a family, and in that family, there would one of the boys wouldn't be unusual for one of the boys to become a priest out of that family. Families now, 1, 2, maybe 3 kids in a family, and their parents want grandkids and want to have all that, and they do too. The kids want to eventually grow up and have all that. So the chances for vocation are less. People are having less children. Catholic families are having less children. Big families, more source of priests and religious. Just kind of statistically works out that way. If the Pope did change or modify the rules on celibacy, or end mandatory celibacy for the rights of the church that have it, in the Western Church mainly, we would follow the rules more than likely that the Eastern Church that does have a married priesthood. You must be married, and this is true in the Eastern Church, you must be married before you're ordained. You're not a priest and you're single and dating and all that. You have to be married before your ordination. So you don't get married after you're an ordained priest. And well, opposite is true. If he's ordained first, then he can't get married after ordination then. Also, seminarians would need to decide before their ordination whether they wanted to be married, and they need to have somebody who wanted to marry them as well, of course, or already have a wife. And anyone with aspirations to become a bishop. This is true in the Eastern Church. The bishops of the Eastern Church are not married. That's a requirement within those Eastern rites, that if you become a bishop, you must have taken a vow of celibacy. Yes. Yeah, and then Catholic priests, let's say, who were ordained as celibate priests, and then maybe they left the priesthood to get married. They fell in love with somebody. They are no longer an active priest, and they got married. Those priests that are outside the church now or are not active priests that got married, those priests would not be allowed to come back as priests. Of course, they're allowed to come back as parishioners, as Catholics, but because they've already taken a vow of celibacy and they broke that vow, and that's going to be a sticking point for them. So once that vow, and if they change the rules, like Father Philip couldn't get married, after they changed the rule, he couldn't start dating and marry somebody. He's already taken a vow of celibacy, and the vow can't be broken. So that vow would still be in place for the priests who've already taken the vow. That would include people who've left the active priesthood. So Father Philip can't date, is what I'm trying to tell you. If you see him, tell him that. Well, wait till his heart gets better. Don't tell him that right away. All right. All right. Tomorrow I got a couple more things only, and then we'll go over that study guide, and that'll be it. All right. Sorry, tomorrow's the test, guys. Sorry. Tomorrow's the test. That means I need to change a couple things on the study guide. You take something off the study guide.
I did. Okay, I did like one paragraph, and then even though I changed my whole rough draft, like this is the new thing that I turned in. So I don't know how that's gonna go.
Wait, so why do you teacher? What? Why do you teacher? Because I forgot my school shirt at my dad's house. No. This is all I have. And it's great. You only have one school shirt? Yeah. I know, I have a lot. It's so small like that.
You signed the adjustment for assignment.
Oh.
It was pretty easy. I didn't know. What did you do there?
Did today though? I think it's today though. But I didn't.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Is the room quarantine phone?